there, welcome back to the next SIYI Robotics video. This one will be covering a couple things, primarily the A8 Mini Gimbaled camera. It's a Sony sensor with a maximum resolution of 8 megapixels and it's capable of up to 6 times digital zoom. Beyond that, we also have the MK32 controller over here, which along with the air unit it comes with, we'll be using to set up and assemble this whole system. Alright, so first we're going to walk through the connections for the air unit that goes along with the MK32, and then we'll do the actual A8 Mini. So there's 4 connections to the air unit. First is obviously the power. We have a 12 volt BEC on there. The unit does come with its own BEC, and it is recommended you keep that one. It's very dependent on a clean power supply, so if you replace it with your own to work with different batteries, you do need to do very careful testing to make sure it still properly sends and receives signals and there's no decrease in the quality of any video transmission. That aside, we also have a S-Bus connection that goes to the flight controller, in our case using the Pixhawk. This provides all the input from joysticks, buttons, switches, etc. that are actually built into the controller. There's also a UART connection that goes to, again in our case, telemetry 3, that provides all the telemetry data back to the MK32. So you can use that in a ground control software, our case Q ground control. And then there's also the video input. This feeds the A8 Mini and is also where its power will come from. A8 Mini operates off of about 11 to 16 volts, which should be provided from this air unit. So that is it for that piece. The A8 Mini, the only other connection you need to worry about is the control input, and that'll come from the flight controller. There's a few different ways you can do it. You can do it with UART, S-Bus, or UDP. We're using UART, so it's just connected to telemetry 2. If you're using one of our products, we do provide the firmware and all the parameter files you need, but we'll also walk you through how to change them yourself further on in the video. If you were to go with S-Bus or UDP, you might have some interest in changing some of the settings on the gimbal itself. SIYI does provide a software for that you can download from this page. We'll provide a link in the description, and it looks something like this. You can change the channels, mapping, update firmware, etc. as needed. The SIYI cameras are supported by default in Ardupilot firmware versions higher than 4.3.1. So we'll go ahead and show you the firmware update screen in case that's needed for your system. So if we go to ground control, open up vehicle setup, and go to firmware, and plug in our Pixhawk. Pops up here. You should be good to just use default version. As you can see, latest release at 4.3.6 as of this video, and that should work just fine. So skipping that because we're already on that version, go ahead and plug in the Pixhawk, wait for it to connect. There we go. And go back to vehicle setup, parameters will load in, and we'll need to change a few things. So we'll post a link to this page here on Ardupilot, which has some guidelines for connecting SIYI cameras in general and some of the recommended parameter changes. Should be good to follow along with those. Show you where a couple of those are just in case. So to start with, your serial connection will depend on which telemetry port you use, assuming you're going with UART. Serial 2 does correspond to Telem 2, but that's not true for, say, Telem 3, so be careful of that if you're not going with the default shown here. But setting it up is pretty simple. If you just go to parameters, you can search for whatever you need, for instance, Serial 2, and make sure the protocol is set to 8, which is for Storm 32 gimbals, which the SIYI cameras are. And if you go through those, changing the Serial 2 settings, the mount settings, and the cam type, then your camera should be good to work. You will need to adjust RC options. Different ones control different features of the camera, yaw, pitch, record, etc., and you can map those as desired. Alright, so here on the left we have everything wired up just like in the diagram we showed. Lots of long cables running around, so it could be a little hard to see, but it precisely follows that diagram, and if you do, you should be good to go. We also have everything installed here on our bracket that will now mount on a Developer HP. Let's see. Do note which way is front, so the GPS dome or away from the battery connector when you're mounting the camera. It goes in underneath the landing gear, and you can see you can simply slot in right here, and the screws will go through there. So now we'll get that installed and then go out to the test field for some flight footage. Alright, we're back from the test field after getting a recording on the A8 Mini, which we have controls here on the dials, and then record on this switch. That about wraps up what we were going to cover with this one. If there's anything else you'd like us to go over, leave a comment, or feel free to reach out through our website, link down below. And that, I'll see you in the next one.